know with all the layoffs, it can seem like pretty daunting. We're seeing like the best companies actually increasing their hiring. Because if you think kind of at the macro level, right now for all these big companies at the highest level, they are acquiring a lot of these other startups that were chipping away at their business, but now are struggling to survive.
I think what's unique about sales in particular is that this is like one of the only fields where you can actually break into like the world's best organizations just by showing that you actually know how to do this stuff.
They are founders of quite the tech sales education platform, and they are absolutely crushing it in their tech sales career. Both of these gentlemen have a very impressive sales history. Eric, who is a strategic account executive, and Kris, former Olympian, now account executive, are answering the questions that you are probably asking. Stay tuned for a transparent and insightful conversation. So Eric, you and Kris have literally helped hundreds of people break into tech sales through your platform directly, right? So this is higher levels we're referring to, and you're helping even many more just through your YouTube platform. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I can maybe start with a condensed version and feel free to probe in. But yeah, basically 2 years into my tech sales career, I found myself helping a lot of people break in and really started to see similar questions popping up. Decided to make some content on YouTube. Honestly, didn't even think that much about it. Like made 5 or 6 videos and kind of forgot about it. It was Christmas, New Year's. And I came, logged back in like February, March timeframe. One of the videos had like 900 views and a bunch of subscribers. And I was like, whoa. And from there, it was, at a minimum, I was like, let's just keep this going. Let's see what happens. And again, making a super, super long story short, over the course of basically the next 2.5 years, started doing one-on-one coaching, got tons of requests, met Kris along the way, who has an extremely awesome and perfectly complementary background in marketing, education platforms. And we realized for a lot of different reasons, instead of potentially looking to affiliate partner with other programs, we were in a unique position to build something ourselves and also really hyper focus on not just breaking in, but also supporting students throughout their entire lifetime in tech sales. So that's the shortest version, and I'm happy to break it down more.
Nah, very, very nice and well put. So listen, I had to reach out to y'all. I ran across your content. As I consumed your content, you gave me, you contributed to a very sobering reality of tech sales, right? I could identify with much of what you were. It almost sounded like you would make content, Eric, to talk people out of going into tech sales, that was very interesting to me. But then I would look in the comments and people were like, rah, rah, rah. And so if you don't mind sharing this, okay, in terms of the roles that y'all are in, and you don't have to go like super in depth, but I just want some context. So Kris, if you want to start currently, like what is the nature of your tech sales role? What's your position title? Just a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, for sure. So currently I'm an account executive over at Vanta. So I'm selling security and compliance. Before that, I was over at HashiCorp, mostly in corporate and mid-market. So pretty much in terms of my corporate tenure, it's been very technical. And it's actually like Eric has been a huge help there. Like for me, I didn't know too much about the tech sales landscape. Like I've been a founder. I've done a lot of other things before I went into corporate, but I didn't know anything about like enterprises or like different verticals or segments or anything else there. But throughout my tenure, I've been very, very technical. So infrastructure provisioning, multi-cloud security. Right now, I'm mostly on the compliance and security side. But yeah, recently I actually jumped over to Vanta. So pretty exciting stuff, still ramping up, going through the motions.
Wow, man. Congratulations to you. That's awesome. You, Eric?
Yeah, I'm a strategic automation account executive at my current company. So we sell, I would say, 4 kind of main products, if you will. And one of them is very heavily engineering focused compared to the others. So that's really my focus. And right now it's been awesome. I've learned a ton this year. It's the first job where I'm traveling probably 2 to 3 times a month to New York, Toronto, Chicago, and actually visiting in the field with some of our strategic customers. So it's been quite a ride this year for sure.
No, that's powerful. So, so when I think of y'all too, and a lot of viewers can probably identify with me, y'all are just impressive gentlemen, right? Like You are, right? And so I'm like looking at y'all, I'm thinking about my background, and I'm like, gosh, I feel like I made it into tech sales just like by the seat of my pants, right? And and so a question that I want to start getting into, because we're going to talk about more of the specifics of how you have helped so many people get into tech sales, right? Concerning the background of a person, what are common themes that you see that makes up the background of people who typically are able to land jobs into tech sales, meaning their education, their work history, even personality types? If you want to get into that, we can start with you, Eric. Kris, if you want to chime in, feel free to do so.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd say is, it's funny. I guess on paper, I had a decent background, but I'll be honest. When I broke into, like, I still felt very unshaky, like shaky and nervous on if my background was a fit. I probably overthought it a lot myself, if I'm being honest. So that's one thing I'd say is, regardless of the background that you have, I think it's natural to feel like, imposter syndrome, or like you're not going to be a fit. I would say in general, we get lots of different folks in terms of age and kind of stages of life. But I think the biggest thing is obviously a willingness to figure it out. And really someone who has, in any type of endeavor, whether it's voluntary, high achieving in school or high achieving in sport or something outside of it, like they've had to, again, maybe this is too simplistic, but make something from nothing. And like a great example is one of our students from a couple of our students, but one in particular, Miguel, comes to mind, where he, I think, moved to the US when he was like 12. His family was like Latin American. He didn't know English. He was the only English speaker. So at the age of 14, he had to like sell windows and doors at his family's construction company. And now, to make a super long story short, like he's found his way to AWS. But I've also seen people on the other side of the spectrum that maybe don't have as romanticized of a story, but they're very diligent with their work. They're very, able to communicate. They're very logical thinkers. And I think there's all sides that I'm sure Kris can contribute to in terms of backgrounds that mold in well, so long as they understand the role and they want something with a little bit more risk and they're willing to do something knowing that they could fail versus a safer option, if you will. So.
Okay. So look, I'm going to do an insert question, and then I have a direct question to you based on what Eric just answered, Kris. I'm going to come to you in just a moment. The risk that's involved in this, right? You know, is it worth it, Eric? Just, is it worth it?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because I had a very cushy job out of college as an engineer. And again, nothing like insanely, I wasn't getting paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I had a very, very safe path in front of me at a very, like, one of the best tech companies in the world. And I got there and I hated it because I had come from a competitive background and I was rewarded and also not rewarded for my performance. And just being, regardless of the work that I was doing in this engineering role, to just get the same paycheck, to just be told, hey, 2 to 3 years from now, you could get promoted. I hated that. And so for me, it's 100% worth it, even if I fail. I would much rather have my destiny in my own hands. And I know that even if I failed a lot early on, long term, I'll be better for it and be much, much better suited. So.
Heck yeah. Kris, sir, I checked out your LinkedIn and I read at one of the first jobs that you have listed on there, you basically helped a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. You helped them completely turn around, right? I'm curious, Kris, if I can articulate myself clear enough. What type of background or makeup or contribution would you say, like, where are you pulling that kind of information from? The ability to have that type of business acumen to work within an organization and bring that kind of contribution to them.
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I landed in that role like completely by accident. So like at the end of my so I was a professional track and field athlete. Went to the Olympics in Tokyo, and at the end of my career, I was sort of looking for something else. Like I needed to sort of channel my energy into really just anything. And I had a couple of friends, actually I had quite a few friends who were entrepreneurs. This was like at an earlier stage of their company. So they had been going at it for a little over a year by themselves. And I would be like on the sidelines, just like giving my input. Like I've always like read a lot of books, different things. But I had never been like an operator, and I joined at a very early stage. And I think I just ended up in this weird situation. Like I didn't know anything about tech sales. I didn't know anything about like how to start and grow a sales team, how to do marketing. But it was a very interesting time because I kind of just like had to learn all these things. And so I don't think like I didn't take the traditional route. So like I didn't work for, 10 years until I got to like a senior manager or even like a sales leader position. I just ended up in that by accident. And that's when I sort of realized like, hey, it's pretty cool. Like I actually really, really enjoy this. But I don't think people should expect to go into that. For me, it was just completely accidental, to be honest. But I think like in terms of a typical corporate career, like I took on a lot of risk. I just needed something. We were very fortunate, but interestingly enough, like I sort of created something else. Even as like as I was finishing up, as I exited that business, we were fortunate enough to get acquired, and it was a really successful operation. I think what a lot of people don't understand is like even as a founder, as an operator, or whatever else, like you think that you're making this absurd amount of money, and like you're definitely getting compensated fairly. But I think like the comparison between actually going into tech sales, like when you break in and even like getting promoted in 12 to 18 months, I mean, the increase in your salary, right? Like how quickly you can actually end up making realistically 300K, which is like, I think a lot of people throw that number around a lot. But I think when you extrapolate it around, like the actual timeline, doing that in your own business, like it takes you probably like 2 to 3 years to get to that. You can get to the same level doing tech sales. And if you're at a good company, I mean, we've all heard of like the stories of people clearing $1 million. I'm not here to set like a precedent that like that's realistic at every single company. But I think the interesting notion here is that sometimes it actually makes a lot more sense for the majority of people if the outcome is really just to make a lot of money, to be financially free to a degree. Honestly, like tech sales is a great avenue for that. So yeah, that was a very long-winded way to answer your question. But
No, that's really good. Right. And I feel like I'm just at the tip of the iceberg. I'm newer into this industry. Part of me, I'm just happy to be able to work from behind a computer, Kris and Eric, and I was able to relocate my whole family from one state to another and never had to go apply for another job, right? Like both my wife and I. That is just like, whoa. And then to see the financial opportunity in it. And like you're saying, I wouldn't say that I'm a businessman yet. I'm working into that way. But the way that I was thinking was, hey, if I can make this much money on a W-2 job over time, why would I take on that level of risk and financial investment into a business when I could just work a W-2 job and start a YouTube channel and then generate income that way with low overhead, right? That was just logical for me. I want to get into now, and I know I'm kind of like skipping over some of the notes that I discussed with y'all, higher levels. I do want to kind of get to that now. Now this platform, this organization that y'all founded, I believe from the outside looking in is phenomenal. And obviously I'm a content creator who creates content around the tech sales industry. So I study people a lot, obviously, right? And it was something very unique about y'all. I felt like the transparency, the directness, the stating on your website that you are preparing people to basically be able to build the value within themselves to then take that to any job, even if it's the best job out there that they're applying for, and to have an opportunity to land a position. I felt like you're creating something, and even listening to you talk, you're creating something that's not really about teaching a person to have something handed to them, but having them stretch their mind, their ability to critically think, better themselves, build the skills, build the value, and then go out there and then contribute to the job market. So all of that long-winded stuff to basically say, with higher levels, okay, let's start off with this. What is it that sets higher levels apart from other educational platforms when it comes to breaking into tech?
Yeah, I can take a first crack at it. Obviously, Kris, feel free to chime in from your perspective. I think for us, to be very clear, one of the reasons we decided to go all in on making our own is I actually very early on, I was asked to volunteer coach for this boot camp that charged like 2,500 bucks or something. The lead instructor was literally some like a PhD student that was getting their PhD in kinesiology and had never been in sales. Like it was insane. And so probably a story for another time. And every boot camp and platform has its perks and pros and cons. But for us, I think one, we felt just with our experience and the types of companies we have been fortunate to work for, and the people in our network, we were uniquely qualified. And I might add, we have a recruiter in our platform that has 10 plus years of experience. We just felt like the total experience was something that was missing from a lot of the offerings out there. But I would say in short, and I can hand it to Kris too, I think the way we've structured our platform is one, to make breaking in affordable and approachable, but two, throughout again the lifetime, we have now an SDR community, and in the future we're going to be have an AE community as well for account executives. Like we are only successful if our offering is successful. So for instance, like you don't have to pay, for all of our offerings, but if you are successful with our $500 offering, we have now earned the right to, have you invest in our other offering, which is now making you a top performing SDR that promotes to account executive. So only if that's successful do you then want to invest in the next option. And I think we've really, it almost brings it back on us. Like it forces us to ensure we continue to get results over the longevity of this platform for its entirety. Because the second that we don't get those results, the whole thing falls apart. So I think we built that in to mutually hold each other accountable, both us and our students. So
yeah, I'll jump in as well. I think there's so many elements to this. Like we're constantly like looking around and like I'll just start with this. Funny enough, like when we started this, we literally like we're sitting in a restaurant. We were like thinking about like, hey, like, is this right? Is this really like the best way to go about things? And we just say, hey, let's just take a crack at it. I've obviously had educational businesses in my past, and Eric, he has a lot more tenure in terms of the enterprise and corporate space, and we just felt like it was this perfect intersection. But I think like one of the biggest gaps that I realized in the space was just that a lot of these like boot camps out there, they're looking to make a profit off of even like placing, a student at a specific company. And I felt like there's a huge gap there because I think what's unique about sales in particular is that this is like one of the only fields where you can actually break into like the world's best organizations just by showing that you actually know how to do this stuff, right? So like even when I was breaking in, I thought that my pedigree, my background, like being an Olympic athlete, having exited 2 businesses, like I thought this was going to be a breeze. I realized it wasn't. And I actually like had to learn, like I had to do the things that like an SDR or like a salesperson, does in their jobs to even get myself an interview in the first place. And on one hand, like you can say that's unfair, but on the other hand, it gives so much opportunity for somebody who doesn't necessarily have this perfect pedigree, who has gone to an Ivy League, university or whatever else. It kind of levels the playing field because now people with like no experience, like Eric, you mentioned Miguel, he doesn't have any formal tech or like specific tech sales experience. And he literally managed to break into AWS, like landing, I'm not going to like, say the OT, but it's the highest OT I've ever seen. It's higher than most, AEs make. And so like when that stuff is possible, it's because of like the environment right now. And so what we wanted to do was create something where we want to enable people to land at the best organizations in the world. We don't want to like specifically partner with 5 or 6 or 7 different companies and kind of limit them into, you have to go with these companies, like, or even like wrongfully so try to convince them to say like, hey, these are the best options for you. Like we would rather create like a skill set for you so that you have the skill set now, like say a year from now, when you want to go, maybe you jump over to a new company. I mean, that's the reality of tech sales is there's so much opportunity, especially if you're a good sales rep, to now go somewhere else. Well, if you're reliant on a boot camp to give you another opportunity, I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of even, learning a skill set, like paying for education, for coaching. And so we're trying to give people an actual skill set, right? Like we're giving you the skill set to go out and hunt for the best companies in the world. And it's been it's been a fun journey. Like we actually just redid like our entire resume section inside of the course, but we're continuously like looking at like what's successful for our students. Like how do we make sure that these people with like very little experience have a realistic chance at breaking into the best companies in the world? So anyway, like I think that's like one of the biggest things that we're focused on is giving everybody a realistic chance at breaking into some of these companies. Like there's people that come to us that have very little confidence. Maybe they've gotten burnt before by other boot camps or whatever else. And I think a big part of it too is like building up that confidence, making them believe in themselves. And I think once they start seeing a little bit of success with these strategies that are working for so many different folks, they're like, oh, I can actually do this. So I think that's the fulfilling part of what we do here. And even like, we haven't taken out a single dollar from the business. We've literally reinvested every single thing back into this. We're not like chasing a quick buck or anything else. Like I think our onus or our focus for this entire thing is just making this a realistic opportunity for folks.
Wow. So I'm gonna ask this question first. How do you prepare a person to be able to bring that skill set into the job force, right? For them to build on the same strategies and then, you know, go to a different job. What does that practically speak and what does that look like? How does that happen?
Want me to take it, Eric? Yeah, so I think it's really simple, to be honest. Like, you know, I see a lot of boot camps, they put a very strong emphasis on like learning all the little details about like what to do as an SDR, like learning all the lingo, the terminology, all these different things. But in reality, like the way that you break into tech sales is the same way that you would actually do the job once you get the job. So it's quite frankly like how would an SDR, you know, get an opportunity, get a meeting? They would one, find the appropriate hiring manager, right? They would use different channels to get in front of them to position themselves. And so I think like there's so many people out there applying. There's so many qualified candidates. Like there's people with way more stacked degrees and, you know, qualifications than both me and Eric that are trying to get tech sales jobs. But coincidentally, like the people that can really stand out are the folks that are willing to do what others aren't, in the sense that like if you as a prospective SDR is reaching out to the hiring manager, if you know, like if you do the things that make other people uncomfortable, like picking up the phone and cold calling the hiring manager and convincing them to get you an interview. Like those are the things where like I mean, we've had students beat out like 1,500, 2,000 other candidates for a single spot. It's because they do these things, right? Like the way that we like to explain it is that there's really two buckets of piles of interviews or resumes. Like the first bucket is the people who just go on LinkedIn, easy apply, right? They do this like with a million different jobs and they're just like, you know, crossing their fingers, like praying that like something is going to come out of it, right? And then I think there's another side of that where there's folks that are actually willing to put in the work. So like what we try to teach in our course is give you this skill set where you're actually doing what an SDR does to land these interviews, to make yourself like stand apart, to actually like when you get in front of that interviewer for the very first interview, you've already proved to them that you know how to do this job because that's what you did to get the interview in the first place. You reached out to the hiring manager. You did it in a way that made yourself look extremely professional. Just like, I don't want to get like, it's a very,
this is
I don't want to
wonderful.
get too deep into the rabbit hole here, but I think that the onus is really just do what an SDR does in a way that makes you stand apart. Right.
And these are the things that higher levels teach.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so much more to it, but like there's also another side of that too, is like, it's not just about doing these things. Obviously, just by doing them, you'll set yourself apart, but how do you do it in a way where like you're making yourself look good? You're making yourself look appealing because you can reach out to a hiring manager, right? But that doesn't necessarily equate to like them thinking it's good. How do you remove risk from the equation? How do you make sure that like there's so many elements to this, but in like when you boil it down, it's a very simple process. It's not rocket science by any means. And I think that's the big thing, that once our students realize that like this isn't necessarily hard, it just requires some effort and dedication. And I mean, you can go on our website and you can look at all these folks that have broken in. They don't have crazy backgrounds. Like they don't have tech experience, sales experience. I mean, our students are getting better results than us, which I think is like the best thing ever to see. Because yeah, you look at us and you might say, oh, of course these guys could do it with these backgrounds. But you look at all of our students, right, who are crushing it with no formal experience. And I think that's where like the proof is, right? Like the proof is in the pudding. Like look at like what students are doing, what they're accomplishing, how they're doing it. So yeah.
Wow. And you said that y'all also have a course where it can bring you from just not just being an SDR, but even performing at a high level, or obviously give you the tools and gives you the teaching to put you in a position to be a top performing SDR, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's our SDR accelerator.
Okay. Y'all, I think this is incredible. And and oddly enough, I actually just had a meeting with a higher up manager at my company, like literally before you and I just cut on this feed. And he was just broadening my mind. I mean, he was, and it's simple, but I think that is so many people who naturally don't think this way, sometimes including me, or I should say all. And he was basically teaching me how to position myself to show value even internally within the organization that's as large as it is, right? And he was like, yeah, you're performing great, right? I'm a very high performing AE. But then he's just teaching me that that's sometimes not enough if you want the promotion faster. Sometimes you have to put yourself in a position of reaching out, finding out what is it that another org is doing from a business process standpoint, and how can you contribute to that, and then showing that to the manager on that side. And I was just like, gosh, just seems so simple. And I feel kind of foolish for, I guess, not naturally thinking like that. But I'm just thinking, I'm going to just put the numbers up and you're just going to come find me. Right. And yeah, I think it's so much value there. Did y'all want to add anything to that? Or because I want to
No,
know
I think
about 2024 outlook. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just say on all of those points, whether it's, an active SDR or someone breaking in, and kind of to your point of confidence, right? Like whether you're breaking in or whether you're a new SDR, or really at every role, like there's always going to be something, you doubting your confidence, whether it's bringing a deal in, at the strategic AE level or whatever it might be. And I would say, I think to all the points that you just highlighted, like that's where I think fundamentally we are differentiated. Yes, we go incredibly deep and give you all this information. I wouldn't brand it as like secrets per se, but we have kind of this brain trust of tons of professionals that are contributing to our platform. And I think on that note, it's like the way that you get confident in most cases, like maybe reversing this, if you're not confident, like sure, there's like the belief in yourself, but also you're like, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? What does this mean? How do I do this? And having something, really a guide and a reference point, both pre-recorded, and a huge emphasis for us is the live coaching as well, to have that consistent feedback loop of, am I even doing the right thing in the first place? What is it I should be doing? And then once you just know what to do, you actually execute on that. And even if, by the way, it doesn't work in your first pass, you've made so much progress now, you can quickly iterate and get, better and better over time. So I think maybe just adding a little bit of depth to what you're saying, which is spot on, is it's like a lot of times just knowing what to focus on and how to do that allows you to make much more better decisions and compound, as opposed to just get a little bit better every day. It's like you wake up a year from now and you're almost fundamentally a different person. So yeah.
Heck yeah. Eric, can you tell us a little more about when you brought up the coaching? What does that look like in higher levels?
Yeah, that was a really big emphasis for us. And right now in our breaking in course, which is Tech Sales Ascension, we have weekly calls with a recruiter. So we, on Tuesday nights at the moment, you can get all your questions answered specific to your resume and LinkedIn. And then on Wednesdays, we have coaching that's led by either Kris or myself. And sometimes we'll have students hop in as former students that have done really well. Hop in and lead those as well. And then same thing with our SDR accelerator cohort. What's awesome about that one, I would say, is that's a course intended for incoming and active SDRs. So we have people, top performers, like we literally have the number one SDR at Brex. He beat out 53 other people this year. And then we have like the number 1 and 2 at Outreach that just promoted to AE. And what's funny on those calls is like, versus the breaking in calls, a lot of people are asking us for our opinion. And then on these SDR calls where we have active SDRs, like I'll say something and then someone else will be like, oh yeah, I did this, this, and this. And like next thing I know, I haven't talked for like 40 minutes, which is awesome. Because it's like they're not competing against each other. They're both like, yeah, this worked for me. And guess what? We're not competing for the same promotion. So yeah, I'm more than happy to give you all of the things that have worked really well for me. So anyway, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Wow. And in that coaching right now, that's just a part of the course. Like when someone pays to go through higher levels, they get access to what you just mentioned.
That's correct. Yeah, lifetime access to the weekly coaching calls we have.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, that's something that honestly, I probably should have done that more, and I probably still should. I don't know what it is with some people. I mean, maybe you can comment in the comments if you have some insight on this, but I almost don't like reaching out to people. It's so silly, but I don't, right? And it's like I can know that I'm struggling with whatever. Like, man, I probably need to do a role play, some mock interview or something. I'm like, man, I don't want to do that fake stuff with nobody. I'm gonna just figure it out, right? then go bomb the interview, and then have to get coaching from my wife later. But so it's so much value in it. It really just is. 2024. The outlook, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm just curious for a couple of things on how you want to answer this. What from your expertise, what does the future of the SDR, the AE role look like in tech sales, and what do you think 2024 looks like in comparison to, let's say, 2023? Eric, you can go first.
Sure. Yeah, honestly, I think right now, I know with all the layoffs, it can seem like pretty daunting. We're seeing like the best companies actually increasing their hiring. Because if you think kind of at the macro level, right now, for all these big companies at the highest level, they are acquiring a lot of these other startups that were chipping away at their business, but now are struggling to survive. And also, for instance, it's a very good time to go after, people who have laid off, maybe because they're changing their direction. Like big companies that are unfortunately laying off are dropping products altogether or shifting their focus to AI. It's a really great time to try and break into these companies and land, a new business contract or replace someone or whatever it is. So I think maybe the startup scene in particular has been very shaky. But even just now here in Austin, I think MongoDB, which has a huge presence here, announced they're hiring 40 SDRs this quarter. Like there's tons of companies that are going on the offensive. And even compared to 6 months ago, I think it's already stronger. I think by the end of this year, it's just going to continue to ramp up.
You have such a unique perspective. Gosh. Right. So it's kind of like as the funk is hitting the fan, you don't have to look at it as, oh, well, let me shy away from entering in. No, these are opportunities. And listen, a manager at my company literally just told me this, speaking to them, that when they were hired at my company, I work for Intuit, they were hired at a time basically where a layoff or layoffs had just taken place within the organization. And then that's when he came in and he filled the spot, I guess, because they were just turning over a new leaf in a new direction. And this is 7 years later. He's promoted up since then. So, gosh, man, just the way you think, huh? Anything that you wanted to add to that, Kris?
No, I think I'll say too is like, it's very similar to how all other markets move, right? Like say you're an investor, right? Like you don't want to buy when things are at its hottest peak. You want to buy when like the attention is kind of away from it. Like when there's a bunch of FUD in the market, when everybody, and it's very similar to like being in a role. Like when's the best time to get promoted? A lot of people think, and there's some truth to that too. Like a lot of people think that whenever everything is booming and there's this like expansions happening everywhere, like that's the best time. But in reality, like what happens in a downturn is everybody's complaining. Everybody's like talking about all the bad things in the world, how there's not enough leads, there's not this, there's that. But like there's going to be a few individuals that will kind of like separate themselves, absolutely just put their heads down and crush it. And who do you think is going to be the obvious pick once like the market turns a little bit around? They're the ones that are going to be up for promotion. They're the ones that are going to get that special treatment. And so I think like very similar to breaking into tech sales today versus doing it like a year or two ago, like, yes, it's harder to maybe like land interviews or different things, but even some of the things that we try to teach are like, there's so many people that are clicking easy apply. It's funny enough because like as the market has gotten tougher, as like there's more and more layoffs happening, I don't know what it is. Like I'm not putting our coaching and everything on like the highest pedestal, but our students have been getting better and better results. And I truly think it's because like when there's a million people easy applying, when there's a million people not willing to put in the work, like you as a candidate, if you're putting in the work, you're doing the right things, you're showing that you understand how the job works, what the job duties actually revolve around, you're standing out. When there's 800 people doing that and you're part of the 5 that are actually going the mile and showing that you have an understanding of it, you're going to get more interviews because like you're part of a smaller percentage of folks, right? So in the same way, like I think there's so much FUD around it. There's so many people thinking that AI is going to take away their jobs. It just comes down to like adapting, you know, like I think with all the new AI tools, with all the new shiny things that are happening, like you just have to adapt to it. You just have to think like, instead of complaining about it, think about how can you leverage these tools to set yourself apart. So yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity. I always think there's opportunity when things get really bad. Historically, whenever I've made the most money or progressed my career the most, it's always been in a time in the market when things are really like just hitting the fan. Like when things get really, really bad is when you truly have opportunity. If you break in today, a year from now, when the market is turning around and you've been crushing it for 12 months, you're going to crush it as an AE. You're going to get promoted, right? So that's where the opportunity is. I think like people need to be better at flipping the switch a little bit, thinking ahead instead of just thinking, oh, over the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever else.
Kris, I 100% agree, man. I think that's profound. Eric, Kris, is it anything that y'all want to add or leave? I think this about done it, man. I'm excited.
No, we appreciate you having us on, man. Yeah, I guess if there's any questions for us, definitely let us know. But yeah, thanks for guiding us through this conversation. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, no, powerful, man. Thank y'all.